The shovel hit dry earth with a dull thud, and the woman's hands trembled as she dug deeper into the Wyoming soil, her dark hair hanging in tangled curtains around her dirt-streaked face. Xander Young had been riding for 3 days straight when he spotted her there in the fading light of dusk, about 2 miles outside of Opal, carving out what could only be described as a grave-sized hole in the barren ground beside an old cottonwood tree. He pulled his mare to a stop and sat there for a moment, watching this strange scene unfold before him. The woman wore a dress that had once been blue but was now more dust than fabric, and she worked with the mechanical movements of someone who had given up on everything except this one final task. Her face was gaunt, her lips cracked from the harsh Wyoming wind that swept across the plains in this summer of 1876. Xander dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a soft crunch. He was 26 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. He had seen many strange things in his years working cattle drives and odd jobs across the territories, but this sight struck him differently. There was something about the deliberate way she moved, the resignation in every motion that made his chest tighten. "Madam," he called out, his voice carrying across the empty space between them. She did not look up. The shovel continued its rhythmic work, throwing up clouds of pale dirt that caught the golden light. He walked closer, leading his horse by the reins. "Madam, I think you should stop what you are doing there." This time she paused, but she did not turn around. Her shoulders were rigid, her spine straight despite the obvious exhaustion that radiated from her small frame. "Please leave me be," she said, and her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "This does not concern you." Xander came to stand at the edge of the hole she had dug. It was about 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, and perhaps 2 feet deep already. His stomach turned at the implications. "I cannot do that. You do not understand," she said, and finally she looked up at him. Her eyes were an unusual shade of green, like new spring grass, and they were filled with a weariness that seemed far too old for what he guessed was her age. She could not have been more than 23 or 24. "There is nothing left, no reason to continue." "Not today," Xander said firmly, reaching down to take the shovel from her hands. She held on for a moment, her fingers white-knuckled around the wooden handle, and then all the fight seemed to drain out of her at once. She let go and sank down to sit on the edge of the hole, her legs dangling into the shallow pit. "You do not know what you are interfering with," she said quietly. "You do not know what I have done, what has been done to me." Xander planted the shovel in the ground and crouched down beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Then tell me. But first, let me get you some water. When was the last time you had something to drink?" She stared at him as though he were speaking a foreign language. Her lips parted, then closed again. She shook her head slowly. "I do not remember. Yesterday, maybe, or the day before." He went to his horse and retrieved his canteen, bringing it back to her. She took it with shaking hands and drank deeply, water spilling down her chin and onto her dress. When she lowered the canteen, she was crying, silent tears making clean tracks through the dust on her face. "My name is Xander Young," he said gently. "I am heading into Opal to look for work. What is your name?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely audible above the wind, she said, "Beatrice. Beatrice Lawson." "Beatrice," he repeated, and somehow hearing her name made this all more real, more urgent. "Will you tell me what brought you out here to this place?" She looked down at the hole she had been digging, and a shudder ran through her entire body. "I killed a man," she said flatly. 3 days ago. I killed him, and I have been running ever since, and I am so tired of running, of being afraid of everything. I thought this would be easier than waiting for them to hang me." Xander felt his heartbeat quicken. "Who did you kill? And why?" Beatrice pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her thin arms around them. "His name was Marcus Webb. He owned the saloon in Opal where I worked serving drinks and cleaning rooms. He told me when he hired me that the job was simple, honest work. But that was a lie. He wanted more from me, expected more, and when I refused, he told me I would work off my debt to him in other ways." Her voice cracked and she pressed her forehead against her knees. "I owed him money for room and board, you see. I had nowhere else to go after my father died last year. No family, no savings. Marcus said he would take care of me, give me work and a place to stay." "But he did not take care of you," Xander said, anger building in his chest. "No, he took from me. For months. Every night he would come to my room and I could not stop him because he said I owed him, and if I did not comply he would throw me out onto the streets with nothing." Beatrice raised her head and her eyes were hollow. "3 nights ago he came to my room as usual, but I had found a knife in the kitchen earlier that day. A small paring knife. When he put his hands on me, I used it. I did not plan to kill him. I only wanted him to stop. But he fell and hit his head on the washstand, and there was so much blood. By the morning, he was dead, and I ran." Xander sat back on his heels, processing this information. The territories were harsh places for women alone, and men like Marcus Webb were all too common. He had seen it before, the way powerful men preyed on those with no protection, no recourse. The law rarely sided with women in such matters, especially women who worked in saloons, no matter how unjust the circumstances. "Have they been looking for you?" he asked. "I do not know. I have been too afraid to go back, to go anywhere near the town. I have been sleeping rough, hiding during the day, but I cannot keep running. I have no money, no food, nowhere to go. And even if I did, what kind of life would that be? Always looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to recognize me, to drag me back to face the noose." She laughed bitterly. "At least this way I choose how it ends." "No," Xander said firmly, "that is not how this ends." She looked at him with those tired green eyes. "You cannot stop fate. You cannot undo what I have done. Maybe not, but I can help you find a different path forward." He stood up and extended his hand to her. "Come with me into Opal. Let me see what the situation truly is, if they are looking for you, if there is a warrant. And if there is, we will figure out what to do from there. But I will not let you give up like this, not without at least trying to fight for your life." "Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why would you help me? You do not know me. I am a murderer. I took a man's life." "You defended yourself from a man who was hurting you," Xander corrected. "That is not the same thing. And I am helping you because leaving you out here to die is not something I can live with. So please, take my hand." Beatrice stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached up and placed her small, dirt-covered hand in his. He pulled her gently to her feet and she swayed slightly, dizzy from hunger and exhaustion. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I do not remember that either." Xander led her over to his horse and pulled out his saddlebag, retrieving a piece of dried jerky and some hardtack. "It is not much, but it will help." She ate slowly, mechanically, as though her body was doing what it needed to survive even while her mind had given up. Xander watched her carefully, noting the way her clothes hung on her frame, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands continued to tremble even after she had eaten and drunk her fill. "We need to get you somewhere safe for the night," he said. "Somewhere you can rest properly. But I understand you do not want to go into Opal yet. There is an old line shack about 5 miles east of here that I passed yesterday. It looked abandoned but intact. We can stay there tonight, and in the morning I will ride into town and see what I can learn." Beatrice looked uncertain. You would do that? Risk yourself for someone you just met? Yes, Xander said simply, because it is the right thing to do. They rode together on his mare, Beatrice sitting in front of him while he held the reins. She was tense at first, uncomfortable with the closeness, but as the miles passed and exhaustion took over, she began to lean back against him, her head drooping. By the time they reached the line shack, she was half asleep. The small cabin was indeed abandoned, though relatively well maintained. It had likely been used by ranch hands during cattle drives, but was currently empty. There was a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and a single bed frame with an old straw mattress that had seen better days, but was at least dry and mostly intact. Xander got Beatrice inside and settled on the bed, covering her with his bedroll. She was asleep almost instantly, her breathing deep and even. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her, and felt something shift in his chest. This woman had been through hell, and yet she had survived. She had fought back against her abuser, even knowing the consequences. There was a strength in her, buried beneath the trauma and exhaustion, and he found himself wanting to help her find it again. He went outside to tend to his horse and build a small fire to ward off the chill of the Wyoming night. The stars were coming out overhead, brilliant and cold in the vast sky. Xander had always found comfort in that sky, in the endless expanse of it. It made his problem seem smaller, more manageable. He hoped it might do the same for Beatrice. When he went back inside, she was still sleeping soundly. He settled himself on the floor near the fireplace, using his saddle as a pillow, and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring answers, one way or another. Morning came with pale light filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls. Xander woke to find Beatrice sitting at the table, staring at her hands. She looked better than she had the night before, more present, but the fear was still there in her eyes. "Good morning," he said, sitting up and running a hand through his dark hair. "Good morning," she replied softly. "Thank you, for the bed, for everything. I do not understand why you are being kind to me, but I am grateful. You do not need to thank me." Xander stood and stretched, his back protesting the night on the hard floor. "I am going to ride into Opal this morning and ask around. See what I can learn about Marcus Webb and whether anyone is looking for you. I need you to stay here and keep out of sight. Can you do that?" Beatrice nodded. "Yes, I am good at hiding now." The sadness in her voice made his heart ache. He went to the door, then paused and turned back. "Beatrice, I want you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever I learn in town, I am not going to abandon you. We will figure this out together. Do you believe me?" She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw a flicker of hope there. "I want to believe you." "Then hold on to that," he said. "I will be back before midday." Opal was a small town, the kind that had sprung up around a trading post and never grown much beyond that. It had a main street with a general store, a blacksmith, a small hotel, the saloon that Marcus Webb had owned, and a sheriff's office. Xander tied his horse outside the general store and went inside, adopting the casual manner of a drifter looking for supplies and information. The woman behind the counter was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Help you?" she asked. "Just looking to stock up on some provisions," Xander said, selecting a few items from the shelves. "And maybe you can help me with some information. I am looking for work, and I heard there might be opportunities in town." "Depends on what kind of work you are looking for," the woman said. "We have got a ranch about 10 miles north that is always needing hands. Or you could try the saloon, though I do not know what the situation is there right now." "Oh, why is that?" The woman leaned in conspiratorially. "The owner died a few days back. Marcus Webb, found dead in one of the rooms upstairs, hit his head and bled out from what I heard." No sign of foul play, though there was some talk about a girl who worked there who ran off right after, Beatrice something or other. Xander kept his expression neutral. That sounds tragic. Was this Marcus Webb well-liked in town? The woman snorted. Well-liked. Marcus Webb was a snake, if you ask me. Everyone knew what kind of man he was, what went on in those rooms upstairs. But nobody wanted to say anything because he had money and influence. I feel bad for that girl, whoever she was. Working for a man like that could not have been easy. So the sheriff is not looking for her. Why would he? The doc said it looked like an accident. Marcus probably got drunk and fell. Would not be the first time. The girl probably just got scared and ran, which I cannot say I blame her for. This town is not kind to women who work in saloons, even the innocent ones. The woman rang up his purchases. That will be $2.15. Xander paid and gathered his supplies. Thank you for the information. You have been very helpful. He made one more stop at the saloon, which was open despite the recent death of its owner. A tired-looking man in his 40s was wiping down the bar. We are not really open for business yet, the man said, still trying to sort out what happens next with the place. I understand, Xander said. I just heard about what happened to the owner. Terrible accident. The bartender shrugged. Accident, yes, terrible. That depends on who you ask. Marcus was not exactly beloved around here. Between you and me, I think the world is better off without him. Strong words, maybe. But I worked for the man for 2 years and I saw how he treated people, especially the women he hired. That girl Beatrice who left, she was a good person. Kept her head down, worked hard, never caused any trouble, and Marcus made her life hell. If she ran because she was afraid people would blame her for his death, well, that is just sad, because nobody here blames her for anything. Xander thanked the man and left, his mind racing. This was better than he had hoped. No one was looking for Beatrice. The death had been ruled an accident. She was free, or at least as free as she could be with the memory of what had happened haunting her. He rode back to the line shack with a lighter heart than when he had left. Beatrice was standing outside when he arrived, shading her eyes against the sun as she watched him approach. Well? She asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Xander dismounted and smiled at her, the first real smile he had given since meeting her. You are safe. Marcus Webb's death was ruled an accident. No one is looking for you. The town thinks you ran because you were scared, not because you did anything wrong. Beatrice's knees seemed to buckle, and she sat down hard on the ground. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Xander knelt beside her and, after a moment's hesitation, put a gentle hand on her shoulder. It is over, he said softly. You do not have to run any more. I do not understand, she gasped between sobs. How is this possible? I killed him. There was so much blood. He hit his head when he fell. That is what everyone believes, and it is not far from the truth. You defended yourself, and in the struggle he fell. That is not murder, Beatrice. That is survival. She looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks. But what do I do now? I cannot go back to that saloon even if it is safe. I cannot go back to that room where it happened. No, Xander agreed. You should not go back there, but you do not have to. The world is bigger than Opal, Wyoming. You can start over somewhere new. With what? I have nothing. No money, no skills beyond serving drinks in cleaning rooms. No family, no friends. Xander sat down beside her in the dirt. I have a proposition for you if you will hear it. She wiped her eyes and looked at him warily. What kind of proposition? I have been drifting for a few years now, taking jobs where I can find them, never staying in one place too long. But lately, I have been thinking about settling down, maybe finding a piece of land and building something permanent. I have some money saved, not a lot, but enough to make a start. He met her eyes. Come with me, not as anything other than a partner, a friend. We can travel together, find a place to settle, build a life. You would be safe and you would have a chance to start over. Beatrice stared at him in disbelief. You cannot be serious. You do not know me. Why would you want to tie yourself to someone like me? Because in the day since I met you, I have seen your strength. I have seen how you survived in impossible circumstances, how you fought back when you had to, and how you kept going even when you had every reason to give up. Those are the qualities I admire in a person. And because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who have been dealt a cruel hand by life. He paused. I am not asking you to be anything other than yourself. I am just offering you an option, a way forward. If you would rather go your own way, I will help you get started with supplies and some money. But the offer stands. Beatrice was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face as though trying to determine if this was real or some kind of cruel joke. Finally, she said, Why did you stop yesterday? When you found me digging that hole, most people would have just ridden past, told themselves it was not their business. Xander thought about this. I stopped because I could not live with myself if I had kept riding. Because I have seen too much death and suffering in my life, and I was not about to let it claim one more person if I could help it. Because you deserved better than to die alone out there in the dirt, unmourned and forgotten. Fresh tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks, but this time they seemed different. Cleaner somehow, as though they were washing away some of the pain. I will come with you, she said quietly. If you truly mean it, if this is not just some passing fancy that you will regret tomorrow, then I will come with you. Because you are right. I do not want to die. I want to live. I want to find out who I can be when I am not afraid all the time. Then it is settled, Xander said, and he held out his hand to her again. Partners. She took his hand and shook it solemnly. Partners. They spent the rest of that day at the line shack making plans. Xander had heard of good land to the west, in Montana Territory, where a person could file a homestead claim and build a ranch. It would be hard work, but it would be theirs. Beatrice listened to him talk about his dreams, his plans, and slowly, gradually, some of the tension began to leave her shoulders. That night, they sat by the fire together, and Beatrice told him about her life before Marcus Webb. She had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the only child of a widowed father who had loved her dearly. He had taught her to read and write, had encouraged her curiosity and her intelligence. When he died of pneumonia the previous winter, she had been devastated. With no other family and no means to keep the farm running, she had been forced to sell it for a fraction of its worth and head west, hoping to find work and a new start. Instead, she had found Marcus Webb. My father used to say that the measure of a person was not in how they behaved when things were easy, but in how they responded when things were hard, Beatrice said, staring into the flames. I think I failed that test. I let Marcus Webb break me down bit by bit until I did not even recognize myself anymore. No, Xander said firmly, you survived. That is not failure, that is strength. It does not feel like strength, it feels like cowardice. Then let me tell you what I see, Xander said, turning to face her fully. I see a woman who endured months of abuse and still held on to enough of herself to fight back when she needed to. I see a woman who, even in her darkest moment when she was ready to give up entirely, still had the courage to tell a complete stranger the truth. I see a woman who is choosing to live, to try again, even though she has every reason to be terrified. That is not cowardice, Beatrice. That is the bravest thing I have ever witnessed. She looked at him with wide eyes, and something shifted between them in that moment. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. A connection, a understanding, a recognition of two souls that had both known loneliness and were now finding something like companionship in each other. They left the line shack 2 days later, both mounted on horses. Xander had ridden back into Opal and purchased a gentle mare for Beatrice, along with proper traveling clothes and supplies. The woman at the general store had not asked questions, had simply taken his money and wished him well. If she suspected anything about the pale, quiet woman who waited outside of town, she kept it to herself. The journey to Montana Territory would take them several weeks, traveling north through Wyoming and crossing into the southern part of the territory. It was late July 1876, and the weather was hot during the day and cool at night. They traveled at a steady but unhurried pace, stopping often to rest the horses and themselves. During those weeks on the trail, Xander and Beatrice began to truly know each other. At first, their conversations were cautious, polite exchanges about the weather and the landscape. But gradually, as the miles passed beneath their horses' hooves, they began to open up more. Xander told her about his own past, about growing up in Texas as the son of a ranch hand who had died when Xander was 14, leaving him to fend for himself. He talked about the years of hard work, of learning to rope and ride, of moving from ranch to ranch, always searching for something he could not quite name. "I think I was looking for a place to belong," he admitted one evening as they made camp beside a small creek. "Somewhere that felt like home. But I never found it, no matter how far I traveled or how hard I worked." "Maybe home is not a place," Beatrice suggested, stirring the pot of beans that hung over their fire. "Maybe it is a feeling, a sense of peace." "Maybe," Xander agreed. "Have you ever felt that sense of peace?" Beatrice was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yes. When I was a child before my mother died, she used to sing to me at night old hymns and folk songs. I felt safe then, like nothing bad could ever touch me, but that was a long time ago." "You could feel that way again," Xander said. "In time, with patience and healing." She looked at him across the fire, and the expression in her eyes was impossible to read. "Do you really believe that someone can heal from the things I have been through?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I do. Because I have seen it before, in other people, and because I believe that you are stronger than the worst things that have happened to you." As the journey continued, Xander found himself increasingly drawn to Beatrice. It was not just her physical appearance, though he had to admit that as she regained her health and strength, he noticed the delicate beauty of her features, the way her green eyes caught the light, the grace of her movements. It was more than that. It was her resilience, her quiet determination, the dry wit that occasionally emerged when she was feeling more comfortable. It was the way she cared for the horses with gentle hands, the way she insisted on doing her share of the work around camp, the way she slowly, gradually began to smile more often. He did not say anything about these feelings. It was too soon, and she was still healing from trauma that ran deep. But he felt them nonetheless, a warmth in his chest whenever she laughed, a fierce protectiveness whenever he thought about what she had endured. Beatrice, for her part, was equally confused by the emotions that Xander stirred in her. She had believed herself incapable of trusting any man again after Marcus Webb. But Xander was different in every conceivable way. He was patient and kind, never pushing her, never demanding anything from her. He respected her boundaries without her having to ask. And more than that, he made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. When he looked at her, it was not with lust or pity, but with genuine interest and respect. One night, about 3 weeks into their journey, they were camped in a small valley with the Big Horn Mountains visible in the distance. Beatrice had been unusually quiet all evening, and Xander could sense that something was troubling her. Are you all right?" He asked gently as they sat by the fire after their meal. She wrapped her arms around herself, though the night was not particularly cold. "I have been thinking about something, and I need to say it, even though it frightens me." "You can tell me anything," Xander said. "You know that." Beatrice took a deep breath. "I think I am starting to develop feelings for you, romantic feelings, and I do not understand how that is possible after everything that happened with Marcus. I thought I would never want a man to touch me again, never want to be close to anyone in that way. But when I am with you, I feel different, safe. And more than that, I feel alive in a way I have not felt in so long. But I am also terrified because I do not know if these feelings are real or if I am just confused, just grateful for your kindness and mistaking that for something deeper." Xander's heart was pounding in his chest. He had not expected her to be so direct, so honest. He moved carefully to sit beside her, close but not touching. "I need to tell you something too. I have been falling for you since almost the first day we met. But I did not want to say anything because I did not want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. What you went through with Marcus Webb was a betrayal of trust in the worst possible way, and the last thing I want is for you to feel like I rescued you just so I could expect something in return." "That is not what I think," Beatrice said quickly. "You have never made me feel that way, not once. You have given me space and time and respect, and those are gifts I did not know I needed until I had them." "Then I will tell you plainly," Xander said, turning to look at her directly. "I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Lawson. With your strength and your courage and your good heart. With the way you laugh when something surprises you, and the way you bite your lip when you are thinking hard about something. With all of you. But I do not want you to feel obligated to return those feelings. If what you are feeling right now is just gratitude, I understand that. And if you need more time to sort through your emotions, I can give you that too. There is no rush. We have all the time in the world." Beatrice reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and Xander felt the significance of it down to his bones. "I do not think it is just gratitude," she said softly. "I think it is real, but I am still afraid. Of being hurt again, of trusting the wrong person, of losing myself." "Those are all reasonable fears," Xander said, squeezing her hand gently. "And I cannot promise you that life will always be easy or that we will never face hardship. But I can promise you this. I will never hurt you the way Marcus Webb did. I will never take from you without asking. I will never make you feel small or worthless or afraid. And if you give me your trust, I will guard it with my life." Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, hands intertwined, watching the fire burn down to embers. It was not a passionate moment, not a grand romantic gesture, but it was real and honest and exactly what both of them needed. The next morning, things between them were different but also somehow the same. They still traveled together, still made camp and cooked meals and tended to the horses. But now there was an openness between them, a vulnerability that had not existed before. They held hands while they rode sometimes, and at night they would sit close together, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. By the time they crossed into Montana territory in mid-August, Beatrice was laughing freely. Her face had filled out from regular meals, and the shadows under her eyes had faded. She looked like a different person from the haunted woman Xander had found digging her own grave, and he took deep satisfaction in knowing that he had played a part in that transformation. They found their land in the Bitterroot Valley, a beautiful stretch of territory with good water and grass, backed by mountains and open to the sky. Xander filed the homestead claim, putting both of their names on the paperwork as partners in the venture. Beatrice had been deeply moved by this gesture, understanding what it meant. He was giving her ownership, a stake in something real, a future that belonged to both of them equally. Building their homestead was backbreaking work. They spent the late summer and fall of 1876 constructing a small cabin, just 2 rooms to start with, and a barn for the horses and the few head of cattle Xander purchased with the last of his savings. They worked side by side every day, from dawn until dusk, and fell into their bedrolls exhausted every night. But despite the hardship, they were happy. Beatrice discovered that she loved this life, loved the feeling of building something with her own 2 hands, loved the wide open spaces and the clean air and the sense of purpose. Xander watched her blossom into this new version of herself with something like awe. She was not the broken woman he had saved. She was strong and capable and full of life. One evening in late September, as they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains, Xander turned to Beatrice and said, "I want to marry you, if you will have me." Beatrice looked up at him, her green eyes bright. "Are you certain? We have only known each other for a few months." "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," Xander said, "but I understand if you need more time. I am not going anywhere." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "I do not need more time. I know my own heart, and it belongs to you. Yes, Xander Young, I will marry you." They rode into the nearest town, a small settlement called Hamilton, and found a circuit preacher who married them in a simple ceremony with 2 strangers pulled from the street as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple dress that Xander had bought for her, pale yellow like sunshine, and she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that she had picked that morning. Xander wore his best shirt and pants, cleaned and pressed, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her gently, mindful of her past trauma, mindful of the trust she was placing in him. That night in their small cabin, Beatrice came to him nervously. "I want to be your wife in every way," she said, "but I am afraid, not of you but of the memories, of how things were with Marcus." Xander took her hands in his. "We go at your pace, always, and if at any point you need to stop, we stop. No questions, no judgment. This is about us building something together, something good and healthy and based on mutual respect and love. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand, and I love you for it." They took their time, and Xander was patient and gentle, letting Beatrice guide them through each step. When she cried halfway through, he held her and waited until she was ready to continue. And when it was over, she curled against him and whispered, "Thank you for showing me that it can be beautiful, that it can be about love instead of power." "Always," he murmured into her hair, "it will always be about love with us." The winter of 1876 into 1877 was harsh, as Montana winters often were. Snow piled high around their cabin, and there were days when they could not venture outside at all. But inside, they were warm and safe and content. They spent those long winter evenings talking, reading aloud from the few books they owned, and planning for the spring. Beatrice proved to have a head for figures and planning, and she carefully calculated what they would need to expand their cattle operation, what they could afford, and how they could make their homestead profitable. "You are brilliant at this," Xander said one night, watching her work through columns of numbers by lamplight. She looked up and smiled. "My father taught me." He said a woman needed to know how to manage money and accounts just as much as a man did, maybe more so, because the world did not always look kindly on women in business. "Your father was a wise man." "He was," Beatrice agreed, and though there was sadness in her voice, it was no longer the sharp, cutting grief it had once been. She was healing slowly but surely. Spring came eventually, as it always did, and with it new challenges and new opportunities. They purchased more cattle, expanded their herd, and began to build a reputation among their neighbors as hard workers and honest dealers. Other homesteaders and ranchers came to respect Xander and Beatrice Young, and they began to form friendships with the other families in the valley. It was during that first spring that Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice, and her body felt different, strange, and yet also right. When she told Xander, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You and me, a family." Beatrice laughed and cried at the same time. "I am terrified. I do not know the first thing about being a mother." "Then we will learn together," Xander said, "just like we have learned everything else." The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice suffered from morning sickness that lasted most of the day, and as she grew larger, it became harder for her to do the heavy physical work that the ranch required. But she adapted, taking on tasks that she could manage, like keeping the books, tending to the vegetable garden they had planted, and managing their small flock of chickens. Xander took on more of the physical labor, working from dawn until well after dusk to keep everything running smoothly. Their son was born in January of 1878, during a snowstorm so fierce that the midwife almost could not make it to their cabin in time. It was a difficult birth, long and painful, and there were moments when Xander feared he might lose Beatrice. But she fought through it with the same determination she brought to everything else, and when the baby finally emerged, wailing and red-faced, she collapsed back against the pillows with tears streaming down her face. "A boy," the midwife said, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in soft blankets. "A healthy boy." Xander held his son for the first time and felt his entire world shift. This tiny, perfect human was his responsibility, his legacy, his future. He looked at Beatrice, exhausted and radiant in the lamplight, and felt such a surge of love that it nearly overwhelmed him. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, her voice weak but happy. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on anything. Xander thought for a moment, then said, "James, after my father, James Young." "James," Beatrice repeated, testing the name. "I like it." "James Young, welcome to this world. We are your parents, and we love you more than you can possibly imagine." The first few months of James's life were exhausting. Neither Xander nor Beatrice got much sleep, as the baby seemed determined to wake every few hours throughout the night. But even in their exhaustion, they found joy. Watching James grow and change, seeing him smile for the first time, hearing his first laugh, all of these moments were precious beyond measure. As James grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Xander and Beatrice worked hard, saved carefully, and slowly expanded their operation. By 1880, they had a sizable herd of cattle, had added onto their cabin to include a proper bedroom and a small parlor, and had even hired a young man to help with some of the heavier work. Beatrice had blossomed into her role as a mother and a rancher's wife. She was confident and capable, and the frightened, broken woman that Xander had found beside that grave-like hole in the Wyoming earth seemed like a distant memory. Sometimes, late at night, she would have nightmares about Marcus Webb, about the blood and the fear. But Xander was always there to hold her, to remind her that she was safe, that she was loved, that the past could not hurt her anymore. In the summer of 1881, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and their daughter was born in March of 1882 without complications. They named her Alina, after Beatrice's mother, and she had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. James, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything from changing her diapers to singing her to sleep. Xander and Beatrice watched their children together and marveled at the life they had built, at how far they had come from that desperate day in 1876 when they had first met. One evening in the fall of 1882, as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sun set over the mountains, Beatrice turned to Xander and said, "Do you remember the day you found me? When I was digging that hole? Every detail," Xander said quietly. "I think about it often." "I think about it too, about how close I came to giving up, to ending everything. And then you appeared like some kind of miracle, and you said, 'Not today.' Those two words changed my entire life." Xander took her hand and brought it to his lips. "I said those words, but you did the hard work. You chose to keep living, to keep fighting, to build this life with me. That was all you, Beatrice." "It was us," she corrected. "Everything we have, everything we are, it is because we found each other, because you saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. Because you gave me a reason to hope again. And you gave me a home," Xander said. "Not just a place, but that feeling of peace you talked about all those years ago. You and the children, this ranch, this life. This is my home, and I would not trade it for anything in the world." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the yard, and felt the deep contentment that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, the constant struggle of making a living from the land. But there were also good harvests and healthy calves, neighbors who became friends, and the simple pleasures of watching their children grow. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working with the cattle and had a natural way with horses. Eleanor was more bookish, always asking questions about everything, driving her parents to distraction with her endless curiosity. When a schoolteacher moved to the valley in 1885 and opened a small school, Beatrice insisted that both children attend, remembering how her own father had valued education. In 1886, Beatrice gave birth to twins, two more boys they named Thomas and Henry. The cabin that had once seemed spacious now felt crowded, and Xander spent that entire summer building an addition, expanding the house to accommodate their growing family. He was 36 now, his dark hair starting to show threads of silver, his face lined from years of working in the sun and wind. But he was happy, happier than he had ever imagined possible. Beatrice, at 33, was still beautiful, though her beauty had changed from the fragile, haunted look she had once had to something stronger, more grounded. She carried herself with confidence now, and when she smiled, which was often, it lit up her entire face. One day in the spring of 1887, a stranger rode up to their ranch. He was a U.S. Marshal, and Beatrice's heart nearly stopped when she saw his badge. She had not thought about Marcus Webb or the events in Opal in years, had allowed herself to believe that chapter of her life was truly closed. "Madam, sir," the marshal said, tipping his hat, "I am looking for information about a woman named Beatrice Lawson. I understand she used to work in a saloon in Opal, Wyoming, back in 1876. Beatrice felt Xander's hand close around hers, strong and reassuring. She took a deep breath and said, "I am Beatrice Lawson, though my name is Beatrice Young now. What is this about?" The marshal looked surprised. "Well, I will be. I have been trying to track you down for months. It is about the estate of Marcus Webb. He died back in 1876, and his saloon and all his property have been in legal limbo ever since. Turns out the man had no living relatives, and his will was a mess. A lawyer in Cheyenne has been sorting through everything, and they discovered that Webb owed you back wages, nearly a year's worth that he never paid. Along with room and board, he charged you that you should not have been charged for, according to Wyoming labor laws. The estate owes you $217. Beatrice stared at the marshal in shock. I do not understand. He owed me money. Yes, madam, quite a bit actually. The lawyer sent me to track you down and deliver the funds. He figured you might have gone west, so I have been checking homestead records. Took me a while, but I finally found your name on the claim for this property. He pulled a bank draft from his pocket and handed it to her. Here you go. $217, with the compliments of the territory of Wyoming. Xander took the draft and looked at it in amazement. $217 was a significant sum, enough to make real improvements to their ranch, to invest in more cattle or better equipment. But more than that, it felt like justice, like the universe finally balancing scales that had been tipped unfairly for so long. Thank you, Beatrice said, her voice shaking slightly. This is unexpected. Happy to help, madam. Sorry it took so long to track you down. The marshal tipped his hat again and rode off, leaving Xander and Beatrice standing in their yard, staring at the bank draft. Well, Xander said finally, I guess the past has one last gift to give you. Beatrice laughed, and it was a sound of pure relief. I think this is the universe telling me that I do not have to carry guilt anymore. That what I did was not wrong, that I deserved better than what Marcus Webb gave me. And now, finally, I am getting a small piece of justice. They used the money to buy more land, expanding their ranch by another 100 acres. It felt fitting, using money that Marcus Webb owed Beatrice to build an even better life, to create something lasting and good from the ashes of that terrible time. By 1890, the Young family was well established in the Bitterroot Valley. Their ranch was prosperous, their 4 children were healthy and thriving, and they had become pillars of their small community. Xander served on the school board, and Beatrice organized social events and helped new settlers adjust to life in Montana. James, now 12 years old, was already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Eleanor, at 8, had decided she wanted to be a teacher. The twins, Thomas and Henry, were 4 and inseparable, getting into mischief at every opportunity. One evening, as Xander and Beatrice prepared for bed, she turned to him and said, I need you to know something. I need you to know that you saved my life that day in 1876. Not just physically, though you did that too, but you saved me from a darkness that I do not think I could have escaped on my own. You gave me a reason to live, and then you gave me a life worth living. I do not say that enough, but I want you to know that I think about it every single day. Xander pulled her close, holding her tight. You saved me too. I was lost before I met you, just drifting through life without purpose or direction. You gave me something to fight for, something to build toward. You made me a better man, a better father, a better human being. We saved each other, Beatrice, and I would not change a single moment of our journey together. They held each other in the darkness of their bedroom, listening to the sounds of their children sleeping in the rooms nearby, the wind whistling softly through the trees outside, the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. It was a quiet moment, unremarkable in many ways, but it contained within it everything that mattered. Love, family, peace, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The years continued to flow by like water, each one adding new layers to the story of their lives. The children grew up, found their own paths, their own loves, their own dreams. James did indeed take over the ranch, running it with the same dedication and skill his parents had shown. Eleanor became a teacher, just as she had always wanted, and opened a school in the valley that served homesteaders' children for miles around. Thomas and Henry, the twins, decided to try their luck in the mining camps of Butte, writing home regularly with tales of adventure and fortune. Xander and Beatrice grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies becoming slower and stiffer with age. But they never lost the deep connection that had formed between them on that long-ago summer day in 1876. They still held hands when they walked, still sat together on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset, still found comfort and joy in each other's presence. In 1905, as Xander approached his 55th birthday, he began to slow down significantly. The years of hard physical labor had taken their toll on his body, and a persistent cough that he could not shake worried Beatrice. She convinced him to see a doctor in Hamilton, who diagnosed him with a lung condition common among men who had worked outdoors in all weather for decades. "How long does he have?" Beatrice asked the doctor privately, her heart in her throat. "It is hard to say. Could be months, could be years, but he will need to take it easier, rest more. The heavy work is behind him now." Beatrice cried that night, held by Xander, who comforted her even though he was the one facing his own mortality. "We always knew this day would come," he said gently. "We are not immortal, my love. But we have had 29 beautiful years together, and we have built something that will outlast us both. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch. We have left our mark on the world. I am not ready to lose you," Beatrice whispered, "and I am not ready to leave you. So I will fight this for as long as I can. But when my time comes, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you will not give up, will not retreat back into that darkness I found you in. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the incredible woman you are." "I promise," Beatrice said, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. Xander lived for 3 more years, gradually declining but still present, still himself. He spent his days sitting on the porch, watching the ranch he had built continue to thrive under James's management. He played with his grandchildren, told them stories of the old days, and held Beatrice's hand through the long nights when breathing became difficult. He died in the spring of 1908, on a clear morning with the sun streaming through the bedroom window. Beatrice was with him, had been with him all night, and she felt the moment his spirit left his body. She sat there for a long time, holding his still warm hand, remembering the young man who had stopped her from digging her own grave 32 years earlier, the man who had given her everything good in her life. The funeral was well attended. The entire valley turned out to pay their respects to Xander Young, who had been a friend, a neighbor, a pillar of their community. Beatrice stood beside the grave with her 4 children around her, her grandchildren clutching at her skirts, and listened to the preacher talk about a life well lived, about faith and hope and love. After the funeral, after everyone had gone home, Beatrice walked up into the hills behind their ranch, to a spot where she and Xander had often gone to watch the sunset. She stood there, looking out over the valley they had built their life in, and finally let herself truly cry. She cried for the loss of her partner, her best friend, her soulmate. She cried for all the years they would not have together, all the moments he would miss. But she also cried with gratitude for every day they had shared, for every moment of love and laughter and simple contentment. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, Beatrice felt a sense of peace settle over her. She remembered her promise to Xander, her promise to keep living, and she knew she would honor it. Not because it was easy, but because it was what he would have wanted. Because the life they had built together was too precious, too hard-won, to simply abandon. She lived for another 14 years, staying active in the ranch and in the community. She was there to welcome more grandchildren, to attend weddings and christenings, to offer advice and support to her children and neighbors. She wrote down her story, all of it, from that desperate day in Wyoming to her final moments with Xander, because she wanted her descendants to know where they came from, what their family had overcome. Beatrice Young died peacefully in her sleep in 1922, at the age of 69. She was buried beside Xander, and on her headstone, her children had engraved a simple message. She chose to live, and in living, she taught us how to love. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of the Young family for generations. The story of how Xander found Beatrice, how he stopped her from giving up and helped her build a new life, became a family legend, passed down from parents to children. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found. That one act of kindness, one moment of courage, could change everything. And somewhere in the endless Montana sky, two souls danced together beneath the stars, reunited at last and eternally grateful for that long-ago summer day when a cowboy stopped his horse, saw a woman digging what looked like her grave, and said the two words that would change both their lives forever. Not today. The ranch that Xander and Beatrice built stands to this day, though it has passed through many hands and many generations. The cabin they first constructed has been preserved as a historical site, and visitors can still see the original structure, can stand in the rooms where they raised their children and dreamed their dreams. There is a plaque on the wall that tells their story in brief, sanitized terms, but those who know the full tale understand the depth of what happened there, the transformation that took place. The Young family stayed in the Bitterroot Valley for over a century, building on the foundation that Xander and Beatrice had laid. They became ranchers and teachers, business owners and community leaders. They married and had children, faced their own trials and triumphs, and always remembered the story of their ancestors, the man who stopped to help a stranger, and the woman who found the courage to accept that help and build something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. In the end, theirs was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the American West in its wildest years. It was a story of redemption and resilience, of two broken people finding wholeness in each other, of choosing life over death and love over fear. It was a reminder that the smallest moments can have the greatest impact, that kindness is never wasted, and that love, real love, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And it all began with a cowboy, a woman, a shovel, and two simple words that carried within them the promise of everything to come. Not today. Not today would she give up. Not today would she let the darkness win. Not today, and not ever again, because she had found something worth living for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. She had found love, true and deep and lasting, and it had made all the difference.